How do you make your supply chain resilient to crisis and market changes? Historically, small and medium businesses have a hard time adapting to demand spikes or supply shortages. In this episode, we sit down with Hugues Foltz, Executive AI in Vooban, and talk about they helped a major Canadian stove family business thrive despite the pandemic and the Ukrainian war, using an AI tool, of course. Keep listening and find out how to master supply and demand using an AI-powered sales prediction tool. Enjoy!
Welcome, Hugues, to our AI and Digital Transformation podcast. For today, we have Hugues Foltz. He's the partner and executive vice president at Vooban, a Quebecois company which seeks to guide clients in their digital transformation journey via web, mobile development, AI, IoT, business intelligence, and digital strategy. And today, Hugues will be sharing with us a use case on sales prediction. So welcome, Hugues.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So before we start focusing on the use case itself, we'd like you to share a few words or describe Vooban and share a short, give us a brief story of yourself.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation first. So Vooban is since last year, more or less, the largest firm in AI in Canada. So today it's more than 130 people working at Vooban and working on the integration and the deployment of applied AI, like we call it. So we develop custom solutions using AI, and we also take care of the software part, the database part when needed, or everything related to the infrastructure that we have to put in place to ensure that the project will live and also be deployed in the real world. So it can be a shop floor in the manufacturing world, can be, let's say, in an insurance company, in the back office when it's needed. So all those contexts are just what we are facing in a day-to-day since many years. So Vooban is a 12 years old company. We started before the AI movement, I would say. So we were a custom software development company, developing only custom software. And 6 years ago, we started our AI department, and let's say everything kicks off since then, and to be where we are today. So that's a pretty cool place to be right now. And for myself, I'm an entrepreneur in technology since almost all time. So I started when I was 22. I started my first company at 22 years old and sold this one when I was 34. And I'm in the ride with Vooban since then. So let's say it's a cool ride, and technology is something that clearly I'm passionate about. So doing and making business with it's what I love.
It's quite a ride, I would say.
It is.
Congrats. And
thank you.
Maybe before delving into the use case, just a curiosity, how is the AI scene in Canada? Because everybody hears about the AI scene in the US, but not so much is told about Canada. So I want to grab the chance that you're here.
Sure. It's a good question, in fact, because we are well known internationally as a a very, I would say, a very well, our reputation for our universities to train and to get very strong researcher in AI is well known around the world. But the problem is we are a lot better to train those students and to teach AI than to use it. So for instance, our industries, let's say all industries, across all industries, AI is not that well implemented. So we are, and one recent study said that 45% of the Canadian companies, again across industries, don't trust AI. So it's a big problem, clearly, and the government of Canada is taking it very seriously, putting in place many mechanisms to not only encourage companies to move forward, but to force them in some cases. So let's say automate the all the movement of automatization of everything is slowing down, and it's actually not that fast in Canada, but it's really slowed down by only the fact that we are afraid or at least resistant about AI. So this is more or less the situation. We have a few years already. We are in late of a few years. Would say some studies said that we are 5 years to 10 years in late compared to many countries in the use of AI to be more productive, to be less dependent of human workforce and everything. But those years will be very tough to catch up, because let's say a lot of countries are going so fast and implementing so much very, very new AI to be more productive. So it is kind of a critical situation for us, honestly. And you are a bit in advance in the US, by the way, compared to Canada, but you're not a rock star. Not so you can be better, and a lot better too, by the way. There is an interesting study that was published last year, a year and a half ago, by OCDE, and OCDE said that Canada will be by 2030 the last, nothing less, the last country of the OCDE in terms of global productivity, if we continue to just resist to automate everything. So that very strong as a statement, and US is just a bit in front of us, but not that much,
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, I've heard from my Canadian friends, like small and medium businesses, especially after the pandemic, I think they suffered a great deal, especially with the automation part. So I think that's why we'd like to grab this opportunity to talk about this nice use case that you did, because it focuses on let's say a family business actually in Canada, and help them in predicting their sales at a more accurate, with more accuracy. So
exactly.
Maybe you could share with us briefly how you went about with this use case.
Of course. This project is a very interesting one, and we are lucky to be allowed to talk about it, because most of our customers, no surprise, just don't allow us to speak about the project that we are doing for them, and for very good reasons. I mean, they pay good price. I mean, it's not cheap to do it, to build something in AI and to train a model and to deploy it and everything. So they pay for those projects, and of course they don't want their competitor to know what they have done. So SBI is very generous, and for one good reason, they are the largest in Canada stove manufacturer. So they have 5 factories. They sell everywhere around the world, And for them, the first, let's say, key in their phases of automation was to understand better what is going to be the demand. So, and it's so true in many cases when we look at a company, or even if it's a manufacturer or a business working in another area or their field, that it doesn't really matter. As soon as you understand that if you don't master your supply chain, you cannot optimize that much what you are doing, and you cannot neither optimize your operation choosing the right process to automate or to optimize. So mastering and understand, let's say we call it the end-to-end supply chain. As soon as we get enough visibility on the supply chain, we can much more easily focus on automating the right process. So for them, sales prediction was key, like it's again the case in so many businesses. So what we've done is something that we have done. I mean, if we have not done at least 50 projects like this one, we have not done one. So it's very common, and those sales prediction algorithm are so mature. They are almost out of the box, actually. So the challenge is to put in place the right database, assemble the right data set, looking at all data that we have, so all database, external database that we have access to, and assemble the right recipe to train the algorithm. But the algorithm itself is almost 100% ready. So what we have done with SBI is looking at everything that they can get from those external database, and assemble a strong data set where we found very strong correlation. We are looking, as many cases in AI, for correlation. So if we can match a strong correlation with a lot of data, and of course we use the historical data of the company itself, normally we get a win. So that's exactly what we got with SBI. In fact, their sales team was scoring close to 55% of accuracy for the sales of the year. Well, let's say for each year they're trying to plan and to estimate. So 55% is, let's say, for many good reasons, human is not good at all at predicting things. In fact, we don't predict, we estimate. So if for us, an estimation is the best we can do, but we cannot gather a lot of data like an algorithm will do and crunch this data and at the end propose something with a good level of comfort. It's impossible. We don't do that. We cannot do that. So I think it is exactly what the algorithm is doing. So 55% was more or less the average for so many years. And if you think in probability matter, 55% is very close to 50%. And 50% is when you flip a coin. So do you trust data, or do you trust an estimate that is from your sales team? If in fact you can flip a coin and you get more or less the same accuracy, the answer of course is no. So that's also why in some industries like this one, the algorithm was very important and key in the process. The interesting story is we started the training of the algorithm in July, and in less than 4 months, we assembled the good data set. There is a lot of data available for the let's say their word. So it's how many construction that are going to be built next year. So they have a lot of prediction in the construction world, and they have a lot of data also. If you look at import and export data, what material are exported outside of Canada and what material are we importing. So those data are available. So we gather a lot of data, and in less than 4 months, we were able to to train an algorithm, an accuracy of 75% in 4 months, it's pretty good. And so this was the proof of concept for them, saying, okay, if we are able to do that in 4 months, normally in the 6 months or more, the algorithm would just go to the roof. And it's exactly what happened. To the roof in the sales prediction thinking, by the way, it's not 95 or 98%. It's close to 80. And very good prediction would be with an accuracy of let's say, 90 is just amazing. But if you score 85, it's already crazy. So that's exactly where we landed the project. So after a year of training and adjustment of the database, the data set, and we call it the ponderation, so the weight for some variables, we were able to deliver an algorithm with an accuracy of close to 86, 87% of accuracy. So a year in advance, they know with this accuracy how much of each product that they have, they will sell. So in terms of a game changer for a manufacturer, trust me, it's huge. In a matter of adding the good stuff in inventory, adding the right amount of employee, so number of employee on the floor, and also managing the seasonality. So there is peak in some season in their industry, of course, and managing it and put it lean on a year is something very cost effective.
Well, the use case is very interesting. I have two questions. The first one is maybe a bit slightly technical, but I think it's very useful for the listeners to understand. When you're speaking of accuracy, you're using percentages, but in a test that usually is a regression task, so you usually would have another kind of metric. Like, what do you mean exactly? Like, when you speak of accuracy, how do you evaluate it? Because when you said 55%, would it be like they are off by 50% compared to by their target, or it's another kind of measure?
No, it's exactly this. In fact, it's year after year, we compare the sales estimation, so from the sales team, to the real sales that was made by the company. So each year, at the beginning of the year, they have to put a number as every sales team. So kind of betting, okay, this year, I think I'm going to sell in this, for let's say, for instance, in this country, I will sell that number of this product, and the same for every product. So we gather all this information, and it's the bet of the sales team. So the bet of the sales team is the best estimate they can do, and of course we challenge it with the bet of the algorithm. So at the beginning of the year again, we will run the model, and the model will do its bet. So for instance, then 85 to 87% that we got is the prediction of the sales that will be made. And at the end of the year, only we can validate if the algorithm was good or not. So that's why it's been 4 years now since the algorithm is running at SBI. So we've been through the pandemic. We've been through a lot of things. So in the middle of the pandemic, the algorithm score close to 78%, I think. So a very good score for an event that never occurred before in the database. But just with all the variables that we had in our model, of course, external data, the algorithm performed pretty well. So that's how we calculate it.
One of the reasons why the use case is really interesting is because it's about stoves, which imply that wood is a part of the logistic chain, of the supply chain. So, and as we all know, like the Ukraine war kind of disrupted the supply of wood, the prices skyrocketed. So I am curious to know how you dealt with this kind of black swan, this unexpected event, and if you had to somehow retune the model, or you had in place a structure that kind of detected this data drift and adapted automatically.
It's a very good question. It depends of the, let's say there is few variables that we have to consider for those, let's say, very vaporous market, because it's so difficult to predict what those events when those events can happen first, and how much it can be impactful. And it's most of the time very impactful. So for instance, what we are doing, and depending on let's say the size of the company we are working with, if they don't have enough third party between the big importer and them, meaning that they don't have a lot of stock available for them within and with them, with their partners, meaning that they are going to be impacted very, very quickly. Like we have another customer in the steel industry, also one of the largest steel frame builder in Canada, and they are so close of the supply chain. So if there is one glitch into the supply chain, one boat stuck somewhere, one thing that happened, one tax that moved, automatically they are impacted the next week or into the next month for sure. So we are, for them, protecting with a good buffer. That's the first thing. And of course, they are connected, and they have to run the algorithm a lot more often. So the thing is, the algorithm will adjust itself. So those impact, those rules, taxes, whatever it is that impact the market and the availability of, if it's wood, if it's steel, whatever it is, can be managed by the algorithm. But it's all about retraining the algorithm and ensuring that we also put the right weight on those variables. So it's as simple as that, and it's easy to say it, but not that easy to apply, honestly. So that's a very tricky part of sales prediction. And we call it, by the way, demand prediction for those industries that are very impacted. So it's not about the sales that we have to think first. The mindset must be what will be the demand, and what will be the demand is also, again, along the supply chain. So if we are not ready, or if we don't necessarily want to know how much sale we will do, we need to understand the market will get what kind of demand. And the other thing is looking the other way. So a supply chain have two directions. So can the provider or your suppliers also supply what we need to produce?
Yeah, that's really it's a really fascinating use case, as Gabriela said. And I hope that other small and medium companies actually implement this, since, like, for example, a food supply chain could benefit from this. But going back to the SBI use case, you mentioned in your website, like, for example, something to be proud of, actually, is that you, Vooban, your team, worked together hand in hand with SBI. So they were able to procure, for example, a small group of people who would volunteer or would dedicate their time to working with Vooban to create this sales prediction model and so forth. How easy or difficult was it, like, to come up with this system and to be able to understand their data literacy and, help them transition towards the AI path?
It's surprisingly, for them, for all our customers, I would say, it's surprisingly an easy ride, because our, today AI scientists have we have in the AI world, I would say we have two kind of AI scientists. Some are researcher and they are very good at it, and we need them. So, but they are normally working in universities and doing research is their passion, and they are again needed by our field. But the other kind of AI scientists are the kind that we hire at Vooban. So they are thrilled by applying AI, and applying AI also mean to understand the context of a customer, to understand the problematic of that we are trying to solve, and to work with the employee of our customer to ensure that we understand all the small details that will bring the model to the accuracy, if it's accuracy that we're looking at, to the prediction and the quality of training that we are looking at. So it's all about ensuring that we are at the right place, and that's their job, literally. So the working with our customer is our day-to-day, simply as that.
And in your direct experience, how important is for the customer to actually understand the structure of your solution? How important is to have what some call an AI champion inside the company that somehow understands a bit AI and can also help introducing and integrating this new solution that you provide within the company, and to somehow overcome the skepticism of some people that we know are there?
The quick answer to this one is they don't need, for SMEs, let's say, and I would say all SMEs don't need anyone with a specific training or very, let's say, an AI scientist as we have here. You don't need anyone. Well, so let's say you need one person or a small team of passionate people about technology. So that's very important. So, and passionate is not someone that study a lot in this field. I mean, so it can be an engineer just passionate about new technologies and willing to take care of the digital transformation for the company. It can be the CFOs, can be anyone, as long as they are, again, willing and thrilled by those projects and willing to take care of them. So other than that, honestly, it's so specific, as those skills in AI are so specific, and understand that the minimum diploma that you need for those guys is a master, and a master is okay, but a PhD is a lot better. So for us, our team, our AI team, is a team of close to 30 people now. So on 130 people, we have a team of 30 people. So that's also an interesting number. It means that we have a large team of programmers. We have a large team of data, let's say data scientists and database architecture expert. So preparing the data and the system that will digest the algorithm is also very important. So it's a big part of the company at Vooban, actually. And in this team of close to 30 people of AI scientists, we have more or less 20 of them with a PhD or a post-PhD. And the rest is with a master in AI specifically. So two things into this info. First, they are very expensive. So hiring one only for one project, I think it's not a good move. I'm sure it's not a good move. And the other thing is, they are a lot better when they are working with their peers. So they need colleagues to challenge them and to build a very strong solution. So for us, at the beginning of this service, 6 years ago, when we started with the first AI scientist, honestly, we got a good velocity only after once we got the team of 4 to 5 people.
Yeah. I totally agree with what you're saying. And what I meant is that, of course, not SMEs don't need an AI professional, but in our experience, we see that having someone who understands how AI works, not someone who is able to develop AI, but someone who understands more or less the importance of a data set, how it works, someone who can really be the internal referral, for the company. Because otherwise, if it looks like a black box, it can be scary and people don't really want to adopt it. But of course, like for SMEs, it doesn't make sense to, unless they do AI, it doesn't make sense to have an AI team. So yeah, absolutely. But I think it really depends also on how technologically advanced the company is. If it's a company that relies a lot of innovation and has a lot of engineers who are a lot into innovations, then I think they're already ready to work with a company like Vooban. But there are also other companies that are lagging much behind, especially in Europe. So sometimes the leap is quite wide, and they really need
behavior change, I think.
Not just a behavior change, but more like they need to somehow to be educated about how AI works, because it's like magic to them sometimes. And if they feel like it's magic, then either they don't know how to use it properly, or it stays on a shelf and kind of gathers dust because they're too afraid to use what they don't understand. So that's what I mean. And I was wondering if that's also your experience in Canada, or maybe in Canada, the average awareness of AI is higher, and so you don't have this kind of issues.
In fact, clearly it's needed by all companies. For the level of skills that you are mentioning, it's our role. It's the role of the AI firm to train the employees or the the main stakeholder for the digital transformation in our customer business. So it's our role at Vooban to do that. So the AI scientist, like you mentioned earlier, is anyway working with the employee of our customer. So the let's say we call them SMEs. So SME, like subject matter expert. So for us, a subject matter expert need to be trained about at least what is a good data, what is a wrong data or a bad quality data, and what is an algorithm, and at minimum, how does it work? So that's what we take care of, for sure. But this very minimum information and understanding of what we are doing also. So that's key. I agree.
Awesome. So it confirms what's our perceived reality here. So yes, definitely. Well, maybe let's go through the other questions that we'd like to ask. But first and foremost, I would say you developed this kind of application for a specific customer. How easy, not how easy, let's say, do you think this kind of solution could be applied to many other small and medium enterprises? And if so, could you give our listeners a few examples for the sake of understanding?
Yes, let's say sales prediction and demand prediction in general. It's a more general term to use. Demand prediction is so easy to implement and deploy. It can be used by all industries, more or less. For SMEs especially, it's not that expensive and a real game changer, for sure. So for them, what I would suggest, if they are in the small part of SME, So small companies can also work together. That's another thing, because one algorithm very well trained to predict demand will serve an industry altogether. So it's not a race, and that's something very tough in the head of a lot of companies. The race to implement and to use AI must be seen as something that have to be done. So even if you have to work with your local competitor, I would say it's good to do that, because at the end of the day, your real competitors are from outside of US, outside of Canada for us, outside of your own country normally. And that's exactly where, to build strong economy for each country, I will always recommend to assemble and to go through associations that exist already, where a project like that can be landed with no cost, more or less, for the members of the association, and can benefit the entire industry, for a state, for a country. So that's something that when I said that the government of Canada is pushing the implementation of AI through a few initiatives, this is one of them. They are going to just force, kind of, because it's going to be available through many associations to serve specific needs for specific industries. So once the tool is there, it's their decision to use it. But I mean, of course, they will do it. They will use it, and it's key. It's key for transforming our industry.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think part of the issue about the adoption of AI is that, as you said, humans are very bad at making predictions. And so I think they just refer to the last, let's say, example that is similar. So I think some are thinking about the time that online, like the internet took to become a reality, or the time that cloud solution took to become widespread. Like, for example, in ERP, the cloud technology took like 10 years to become something kind of common. And so I think many companies, especially small companies, they think, well, I have time. It's going to take 5 to 10 years for it to change. So I don't need to run. It's not a race. I have my time. I think this is very common in my experience. What do you think?
It is very common, and it's, in fact, it's a bit scary when we think about it, because the race is on since many years now. So each year that our industries, our companies are losing, on top of what we are already lacking, those years will cost a lot for them. So I agree. We have to consider that the race is on since too long. So the right, we call it a posture. So the right posture today for us, when we speak to companies, when we are asked to do a conference, is just to hurry and to run as fast as possible. The transformation must happen, and we are in late. That's all. And it's true for North America altogether.
And not just North America. I think the Western world in general. It's like,
yeah, there's a lot of countries that are in late. And if we want to face with the same tools or weapon, depending on how you want to take it, for the challenges that will come in the next 5 to 10 years from those countries that are automating everything at a very high speed, we have to move forward as fast as possible.
This I totally agree. But then I'm also seeing another shift in the world, which is like people preferring to use plug and play AI tools. So just having like, I don't know, like a plug and play software to do sales prediction, rather than having it customized, like having to go reach out to Vooban and then understand how their situation is, what would be the best approach for them, and so forth.
Yeah, it's a way to say that the marketing is no code solution equals no AI scientist needed. And we don't really agree, but what's your take on that?
In fact, we develop at Vooban, for example, we develop our own tool to do sales prediction. So after 10 projects, redoing everything again from scratch, more or less, we figure out that it could be interesting for our customer to just pay a small fee per month and get the platform, and only pay once for the training of the algorithm, because the training must be customized. So it's not possible to train and to an off-the-shelf software using AI, a performant one doesn't exist yet. So what we created is just a platform that can digest any kind of data, and that we can follow into a specific AI model. So once we say it, it's clearly less expensive for the customer, and for sure we are close to the no-code approach. So you don't need that much people internally to manage it. They have access to an interface already well developed to drive it and to modify the training if needed in some cases.
Yeah, and I think also another plus is that you guys can give support and like educate them about their data.
And you do the startup of the solution. I think you come in, you still need to understand the data that need to be used.
Yes, all the phases, and it's important to find for us, again, AI. Remember that there is two ways to see it. The first one is the research way, and the research way is interesting for programmatic that is very, very complex, and that was never addressed before. Okay, and that's the role of universities. But honestly, there is so many use cases that can be solved with the actual algorithm available for free on internet. And there is so many, that's something that people don't really know. But we have one expert in Canada, known internationally, that Joshua Bengio is our let's say, the big thinker in Canada that mostly invent deep learning with his colleagues. And what Joshua Bengio said a year ago when we were giving a conference together, he said to the crowd, if you just use the actual algorithm available on the web, talking to all kind of companies that were in the room, he said, you're gonna need 10 years to go through it. So first, start by using what exists. And that's exactly our thinking. So applying AI and algorithm ready to be applied, that's the first thing to do.
Yeah, definitely the right philosophy, and what we also try to do here at GMSC Consulting. So definitely, AI is becoming a commodity. You have solutions that need to be customized and deployed by someone who knows how to make them, but our role as a company is not the one of creating new AI, but to adapt it and integrating it. So although making new AI would be challenging and interesting, but that's not our role.
That's it.
Exactly. So, well, I think that's it. Do you have any other questions?
Oh, yeah, of course. The last question. Could you recommend to us, Hugues, a book that you like? It doesn't have to be technical, of course, but yeah, a book that you could suggest to our listeners.
Yeah, there is a few for sure. Once is I have one very, very new that is interesting probably, but for a very actual subject, which is generative AI. So it's from David Patel, and it's artificial intelligence and generative AI for beginners. So that's a clean book to understand what is really ChatGPT, what is what are those solutions of generative AI and what generative AI can do. So this is a very new recommendation, but there is so many good books about AI. So Prediction Machine is another one. So if you're curious about prediction, read Prediction Machine. This is a neat book, so well written to understand the future of AI, more or less.
Great. So thank you again, Hugues, for this wonderful episode. And for those who want to learn more about Vooban, of course, we'll be providing in the show notes the details on Vooban and on Hugues, so that if you want to work with them as well, you can contact them. And to whoever who likes the podcast, you can subscribe to us and leave us a message.
And thank you so much for having listened to this episode. And thank you again, Hugues, for having shared your experience, your hands-on experience with us and with our listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.